Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWUS. We're into NFL Week 6, 49ers Seahawks. Good one on Thursday Night Football. This one's in Seattle. Let's do it.
Welcome to the SWUS. The SWUS. SWUS. Hey, get the SWUS.
All right, like I said, San Francisco is on the road in Seattle for this one. Seahawks catching 3.5. It was at 3.5, then it was bet down to 3. Looks like it's back up to 3.5 across the board. In fact, I don't even see any 3s. Total sitting at 49.5, pretty much across the board here as far as the total. Let's take a quick look at the pie charts, and according to the data here, action's coming in pretty heavily on the San Francisco side. Over 60% of the tickets, over 75% of the money on the 49ers. But as I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the 49ers offensive depth chart here. Deebo Samuel, not on the injury report. George Kittle, not on the injury report. So although obviously there's still no Christian McCaffrey, Ricky Pearsall also still out. This is going to be the healthiest we've seen this 49ers offense in a few weeks now, which is huge for them because obviously injuries has been the lead story for this 49ers offense this season. As far as their numbers on the year, it looks pretty good. They're second in yards per play, 11th in success rate, 8th in EPA, 10th in DVOA, looking like a top 10 offense, no doubt. Still nothing compared to what they were last year, pretty much first across the board in everything. Obviously, that's not what we've seen so far from the 49ers offense, but by no means has this been a bad offense. Brock Purdy on the surface, numbers are definitely looking a little bit rougher. Passer rating last year, he was first, dropped to 14th. Touchdowns, he was third, dropped to tied for 13th. Completion percentage, he was 6th, dropped to 18th. But if you look at some deeper metrics, it indicates that he hasn't really been that bad. I mean, he's second in PFF passer grade, 4th in big time throw rate, 7th in turnover-worthy play rate. So basically, these numbers are indicative of Brock Purdy still being that guy, and his service level numbers might not be the best indication on how he's played so far. But how does he match up against the Seattle pass defense? That's what we need to know. I mean, it depends on what week. In weeks 1 through 3, they were looking like the best pass defense in the NFL. They were allowing just 157.7 passing yards per game, 4.7 yards per attempt, 38.7% success rate per dropback. That was pretty much first across the board in metrics. Granted, the schedule, if you look at who they played, it makes sense. They didn't really see any quarterbacks. Last 2 weeks, though, 278 yards allowed per game through the air, 61.1% success rate per dropback, 10.5 yards per attempt, an average opponent pass rating of 133.9. So in the last 2 games, you got Jared Goff on Monday Night Football, and then you got Daniel Bones and the Giants. Seahawks pass defense has really fallen off. But here's the thing. They actually match up pretty well against Brock Purdy. They run a lot of man coverage, 32% frequency on the season. That's 8th most in the NFL. Brock Purdy's numbers significantly better against zone. He's completing just 49% of his passes against man coverage this year. Yards per attempt way down, passer rating way down, turnover-worthy play rate way up. So he's been significantly worse against man coverage. And it's not like Jared Goff only has 19 dropbacks on the season against man coverage. Brock Purdy has actually seen some man coverage. He has like 60 dropbacks on the year, and he's been really underwhelming against it. Another thing Seattle does a lot of defensively, cover one, 27.6% frequency on the season. That's 6th most in the NFL. Brock Purdy against cover one so far this year, 22nd in completion percentage, 14th in yards per attempt, 15th in passer rating, 25th in turnover-worthy play rate. So he struggled a little bit against cover one. And you might be thinking, Kyle, who cares? He always cooks on Seattle. And you'd be right in saying that. He's got excellent numbers against the Seahawks. He's played against them 3 times, 66.4% completions, 8 touchdowns, 2 picks, 10 yards per attempt at a 115 passer rating. So he's played very well against Seattle in the past. But here's the thing. This isn't your grandfather's Seattle Seahawks defense. This is Mike Macdonald's Seattle Seahawks defense. Want to know what Mike Macdonald did to Brock Purdy last year? He put him in a coffin. 18 of 32, 255 yards, no touchdowns, 4 picks, and a 42.6 passer rating. So Mike Macdonald had no problem shutting Brock Purdy down last year. And you want to know another member of this 49ers offense that's had great games against Seattle? Christian McCaffrey. Look at his numbers against the Seahawks in the 4 games he's played against them with San Francisco. He's not playing in this game, obviously. He's still on the IR. So I know everyone's down on Seattle's defense after the last 2 games, and then last week against the Giants, which was just a terrible spot for Seattle. That's why I bet the Giants. I know everyone's down on this unit, but I don't hate the matchup here against Brock Purdy. And as far as running the ball, I mean, San Francisco's rushing numbers look pretty pedestrian. 12th in yards per carry, 18th in success rate, 20th in EPA, 20th in DVOA. Seattle's actually done a solid job defensively against the run. 17th in yards per carry, 18th in success rate, 10th in EPA, 10th in DVOA. So Seattle may be able to shut this San Francisco run game down. And obviously, this is a Kyle Shanahan coached offense. He takes after his dad, which means we're going to see a lot of zone blocking schemes, third most in the NFL. Want to know what type of blocking scheme Seattle's been really effective against? Zone blocking, 9th in yards per carry allowed, 7th in success rate. It's actually gap blocking schemes that have really given Seattle problems on the ground. So I don't think it's crazy to think Seattle can stop their run game too. The only hesitation I have with the Seahawks defense right now is injuries. Nwosu came back from injury. He's hurt again. He's not playing in this game. Reek Woolen is not playing in this game. That's a huge loss. The good news is I think Julian Love and Boye Mafe are both going to play. Mafe's participating in full practice, so it looks like he's going to play. Julian Love's been participating in light practice all week, so I think he's going to play as well. So it's nothing compared to the injuries they had in that Lions game. They got most of those pieces back. They're just missing Woolen and Nwosu, it looks like. As a whole on this side of the ball, like I said, I like the matchup for Seattle's defense. I think Mike Macdonald is able to give Kyle Shanahan some problems here. I think the Seahawks defense plays well in the short week. But what about the other side? Let's talk about the Seahawks offense, which looked like one of the best offenses in the NFL in weeks 1 through 4. They're averaging 25.5 points per game, 6.6 yards per play, over 54% success rate, looking great. And then they just shit the bed against the Giants, just 20 points. I mean, they still had a high success rate, high yards per play, but there was just so many mistakes in that game, and the defense looked terrible, really. It was just a terrible game across the board for the Seahawks. Keep in mind, 7 of their points came from that 102-yard fumble return or whatever it was, which, by the way, I still don't think was a fumble, but whatever. That 7 other points came from that. The Seahawks went just 3 of 13 on 3rd and 4th down. That's terrible. They also were sacked 7 times in the game. But you know what? Props to the Giants pass rush. They're really coming around. Giants have done a solid job rushing the passer. But on the Seattle side, I mean, just a terrible game across the board. They completely abandoned the run. I'm not sure why. Just 11 rushing attacks on the game, and 4 of them were Geno Smith. Geno Smith had 4 carries for 72 yards on the ground in the game, 18 yards per carry. The 2 RBs had 7 carries for 30 yards, 4.29 yards per carry. I mean, they just didn't run the ball at all, completely abandoned it. But we'll talk about the run game in a second. Let's start with the matchup for Geno Smith. Seattle's passing offense on the season, 13th in yards per attempt, 5th in success rate per dropback, 19th in EPA, 11th in passing DVOA. This has been a very good passing attack so far this year. 49ers, solid defense against the pass. They are 23rd in yards per pass attempt allowed. Some of the deeper metrics indicate that this is a top 10 unit, though. 11th in success rate per dropback, 9th in EPA, 4th in pass defense DVOA. San Francisco's pass rush definitely has the edge here. Seattle just 2nd in pressure rate allowed, but that's because Geno Smith gets rid of the ball so quickly. We were talking about that last week. They're just 27th in pass blocking grade, and they're still dealing with those injuries at right tackle. They've had their 3rd string right tackle in for a few weeks now, so they're a little bit hindered. Definitely not the situation you want to be in when you're playing against Nick Bosa and Leonard Floyd, that's for sure. 49ers pass rush has been fine. 14th in pressure rate, 6th in pass rush grade, 5th in adjusted sack rate. Everyone's healthy in terms of the pass rush. Hargrave's out, Hufanga's out, but both Bosa and Leonard Floyd are completely good to go for this one. And you would think by looking at these splits that that's a huge problem here. Geno Smith, struggling when pressured, 21st in yards per attempt, 30th in passer rating. But what were we talking about with Geno Smith last year? He gets rid of the ball quickly. 6th fastest in the NFL, and that's the exact type of quarterback you need when you're going to have a mismatch in the pass protection department. So Geno Smith gets rid of the ball quickly, could be a factor in neutralizing the 49ers pass rush. Definitely don't love the fact that Geno Smith has struggled against this team in the past. In their 3 regular season meetings, just 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, 6.1 yards per attempt, 82.7 passer rating, 11 sacks taken. So he's had problems with this 49ers defense. And even though he gets rid of the ball quickly, and even though that passing offenses look great, I don't love the matchup for Geno Smith. But what about the run game? We already talked about how Seattle abandoned the run last week. They're going to make it a point to run the ball in this one, as they should. The rushing numbers look pretty good on the year. They're 7th in yards per carry, 19th in success rate, 19th in EPA, 5th in rushing DVOA. As we know, same as last year, the weakness of this 49ers defense has been defending the run. 21st in yards per carry, 26th in success rate, 21st in EPA, 17th in run defense DVOA. Kenneth Walker is healthy, and that's huge because in the games Kenneth Walker has played, Seattle's averaging 6.4 yards per carry, over 128 rushing yards per game. In comparison to the games without Kenneth Walker, they're averaging just 3.8 yards per carry, just 74.5 rushing yards per game. So no question, Kenneth Walker on the field makes a huge impact. He's healthy, he's ready to go. Seattle's going to run the ball in this game. Now, one thing I feel we do need to point out about the 49ers run defense is those numbers are a little skewed from one game. In weeks 1 through 4, they were actually okay against the run, just 97 rushing yards per game, 4.3 yards per carry. I mean, teams were able to run the ball a bit on the 49ers, but it wasn't really that bad. What's skewing the numbers is last week against Arizona, Cardinals ran the ball all over the 49ers. 6.9 yards per carry, 172 rushing yards per game, 48% success rate. I'm not saying this means Seattle can't run the ball in San Francisco. I think they can. I'm just saying when we looked at the 49ers run defense numbers before and it was like 26 in EPA, 22nd in success rate, those might be a little skewed from this one game. They got run all over. And just like Seattle against the Giants, really wasn't a great spot at all for the 49ers. So I'm really not taking too much away from either of those games. And also we should mention that Kenneth Walker never seems to be able to run the ball in the 49ers. In his 3 regular season meetings against San Francisco, just 26 rushing yards per game, 8 carries a game, 3.3 yards per carry, which isn't very endearing. But I think the fact that Seattle's coming off the game where they abandoned the run and they shouldn't have, they're looking at the stats from last week and they're like, why didn't we run the ball? They're looking at the 49ers defense and what they're weak against. I think they're going to make it a point to run the ball in this game. So even though these numbers for Kenneth Walker against the 49ers look terrible, I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to have a pretty solid game here. So where does that leave me in terms of placing a bet? Well, personally, I don't think we've seen enough from the 49ers to justify laying more than a field goal on the road here. Yeah, Seattle looked terrible against the Giants. And yeah, Seattle's defense looked awful against the Lions, even though pretty much the entire defensive front was out in that game. Most of those pieces are back. So I know they look terrible in those 2 spots, but we've seen a lot of good from Seattle this year as well. Meanwhile, with the 49ers, I mean, they've played one good football game this entire season, and it was week 1 against the Jets. We really haven't seen the 49ers play a good football game since week 1. I'm not saying they've looked bad. I'm just saying they haven't looked good enough to justify laying more than a field goal on the road in a division game against a Seattle team that I think is pretty good. Keep in mind, that spot against the Giants sucked. I'm big on the Seahawks team this year, and I bet the Giants because that was just such a terrible spot. So I think Seattle bounces back. I'm taking Seahawks plus 3.5, and I'm also taking the under at 49.5, probably a half unit each. I'm not going crazy on this game. If you'd like to see all the bets I have open, head over to KyleKirms.com and click on open bets. You'll see all mine as well as everyone on the staff here. Also, if you sign up to Sauce Network Plus, it comes with access to the Discord, and you can participate in the weekly betting league. $150 and one of these trophies go to the winner every single week. So if you're interested, head over to the website and sign up. Let's have ourselves a nice NFL Week 6. NFL season's been great to us so far. Unfortunately, college football hasn't. But you know what? I got a couple. College football's off to a nice start this week, so hopefully that continues. Please remember to bet responsibly. Talk to in the Discord.